Hi, hello, I'm Sam Harrison. I read, review and discuss fantasy and science fiction books, and today I'm here to talk to you about Calamity by Brandon Sanderson. This is the final book in his Reckoners trilogy, which is his kind of supervillain, superhero, sci-fi trilogy, I guess. It's like urban fantasy, sci-fi, I guess. Now, this video review is going to be spoiler-free. However, I am going to spoil major events from the previous two books because you literally can't even talk about the setup for this book without talking about those previous two books. So the first book, Steelheart, is basically David, our point of view character. It's a single first person point of view. He sees Steelheart, the kind of most powerful, biggest, baddest villain in this supervillain world, get hurt. And Steelheart is supposedly invulnerable. So Steelheart then wipes out everyone who he thinks saw him, but David saw him. And David eventually hooks up with some freedom fighters called the Reckoners, who basically they go out and they take out minor epics, so minor villains basically. So they go to a minor villain and then it'll be like some guy who can I don't know, make himself be a bit luckier, or they won't take out epics who are invincible or whatever. They're fighting back, but in this kind of sustainable, manageable, escapable way. And even though they're only doing this, taking out these minor epics, they're still, every single fight is horrific. They're dying. They are struggling. Even though, again, they're taking no risks, they're going after these really minor epics. And David convinces them to ditch that entire philosophy and to try and take out Steelheart, who is one of the biggest, baddest, and thought to be invincible. So lots going on in terms of that first book, but they do eventually take Steelheart out. It's revealed that Prof, the leader of the Reckoners, is actually an epic himself. And Megan, the kind of love interest in the first book, is also revealed to be a Reckoner, but actually a spy working for Steelheart. Though she is kind of flip-flopping. So she's a spy working for Steelheart, but the longer she spends with the Reckoners, the more kind of good she becomes. And when we move on into book 2, we find out that the reason that's happening is because the more you use your powers as an epic, the more kind of dark or evil you become. So we have all these characters who are, the more and more they use their powers, the more and more they are being evil, and they are, having dark thoughts and doing things that, you wouldn't really want to do, like murdering and all this sort of stuff. And yeah, the more and more they use their powers, the more it makes them dark and it makes them worse and worse and worse. We have, epics who destroy cities for fun. We find that most epics, when their powers first activate, go on a murder spree. And we find out in book 2 that the Calamity, the red star in the sky that appeared when people started getting powers, is actually not a star. It is an epic. It's a epic who's basically like an angel, and he is the one who is actually bestowing these powers. And in the end of book 2, not a lot relevant to the main plot happens in book 2, I guess, actually. But right towards the end, we see that Prof, who is the leader of the Reckoners, is forced to use his powers so much, to such a level, that he actually turns evil and stops restricting himself. So he becomes worse and worse and worse. Cue book 3. So David and the crew are now the last remaining Reckoners. Prof has basically systematically killed all of the remaining Reckoners that were left. The New York Reckoner team that were with David in book 2 have joined with the Chicago Reckoner team from book 1, and now they are working together to try and take down Prof. That's the idea. we find out fairly early on in the book that they are going to a floating city, which is made of salt, which is run by an epic who steals powers, and he's unique among epics because he can't just steal powers, but he keeps them forever. So there's a lot of power stealers out there, but he steals the powers and he can use them in perpetuity. So he has hundreds of different powers and abilities, and he's incredibly powerful. Then we have under him a few other different epics, but what happens is basically Prof turns up to this new city, this floating city, and he basically takes over the city and tries to hunt down this power stealer. And David and Co, the last remaining Reckoners, turn up, and their goal, they kind of reveal it fairly early on, is that they don't want to kill Prof. Their goal is actually to turn him back to the side of good again, and they believe they can get people to turn back to the side of good by facing their weaknesses, which is what Megan has done in book 2 and what a couple of other epics have done through the series, and it allows them to use their powers without the darkness encroaching anywhere near as much. So story-wise and plot-wise, I think this was probably the strongest book of the 3. So the motivation in book 1 to take Steelheart out is probably the cleanest story, than the simplest and the most easy to root for and follow. But the complications added to the lore in book 2 of like, these people are actually not evil, they don't want to be evil in many cases, this sort of stuff. And then Prof turning evil, having, we've known him through books 1 and 2, is very interesting for book 3. So the plot is the most complex, I guess, and the most nuanced. There's a lot more areas of grey in book 3 than there are in the previous books, because like, if they take out an epic, was that epic actually evil, or was it Calamity affecting them and turning them evil? And I did really like that, actually, the kind of push and pull of like, well, these epics are trying to kill us, but we can't kill them, because if we can save them, maybe they will be able to be an asset with us against the other evil epics, So there's actually quite a lot of really interesting stuff going on with that. The evolution of David and Megan's relationship I really liked, and David taking the leadership role kind of officially in this book I did really like as well, because we've got the so he's kind of taking on Prof's role, which I thought was pretty cool. And there's also some there's some developments based on things that happen at the end of book 2, which I won't spoil, but I really enjoyed, and I was kind of expecting it throughout the book. And I think that Sanderson does this thing, and he's talked about it a lot with Stormlight, but where he will go, most people should be able to guess the big twists, because if they don't guess the big twists, then I haven't left enough clues during the books for them to be satisfying and to make sense as plot twists. Hey buddy, I'm making a video. He wants more attention than he's getting, which is why he's coming up here. He's literally sniffing the microphone, so there might be a lot of purring. I think the mic probably edits all this stuff out, because nobody talks about how there's a lot of purring in these videos. Anyway, so are you curling up now? Are you going to have a sit? Okay. So we get some really good development in the plot. Not so much big stuff in the lore really in this one. So in the previous books, each one has had kind of a big lore dump and a big development. So like in book 1, we had a lot of kind of finding out about kind of how epics worked, and we had a lot of stuff about Prof, and we had these hints at his background, which were really cool. And then in book 2, we got the real mechanics of what's going on with the epics and who's making the epics and all that sort of jazz. And finding out that Calamity was a dude, not just like like, you know, a star in the sky, which is what we thought it to be in book 1. Book 3 has a lot less of this. We do explore Megan's powers a lot more. So we found out in book 2 that she actually is not an illusionist. She is bringing things in from alternate realities. So in that case, you know, she's much more powerful and much more interesting than she was before. And Megan's powers, I think, and the way that Sanderson has written them are the most interesting in the books. I really like the combat applications of Proth's powers. So the way that he's using his powers now that he's kind of got access to them at the fullest, which before he was more like, he was withholding using his powers because he didn't want to go evil. But now he's evil, he's got full access, and he's bad dude. I really liked seeing the application of all the superpowers. I mean, all the superpowers, the way they're applied in this book are good, but I especially liked Megan's stuff, and seeing Proth like fully unleashed. There was a bit in kind of books 1 and 2, you kind of get like, oh, Proth's better with his powers than people who are borrowing his powers can be. But then you find out that it's not just that he's actually like, he's been holding back so much. He's like one of the most powerful epics, maybe. And like, I think there's a bit of talk about how he's way more of a threat and way more powerful than Steelheart, who was, you know, the big villain in book 1. Some interesting stuff with Steelheart as well in this book. So Steelheart doesn't come back, but Steelheart is brought up a lot. So in book 2, we're kind of dealing with the David being called Steel Slayer. That's like the big thing, is that he's known for having killed Steelheart. But in book 3, things have kind of progressed onwards, and there's some good lore stuff with Steelheart. I really liked Nighthawk, meeting Nighthawk. I liked the slow reveal of his backstory, and he was like a really interesting addition to the team. Sanderson often tries to have characters who are like funny characters, and he does this in these books with Cody. So Cody is constantly claiming, so he's got like a Texan accent or something, he's from Texas or whatever, but he's constantly claiming different nationalities like Canadian and Scottish and all this sort of jazz. And I never found that joke funny, but Nighthawk as a character is fun, and some of the jokes that are made at his expense and that he makes, I thought were some of the best jokes in the series. This is the end of the trilogy, so I think we need to talk about one thing, which is whether it wraps up satisfyingly. And I would say yes. The one thing that I do wish that we had got from this world is more. So with the Skyward series, you know, that ended up being 4 books, 3 novellas, and now it's having a sequel series. And I do wish that Sanderson, well, my assumption is that Reckoners did not commercially do very well, because I don't know really anyone who's read it, especially, and I don't think I know anyone who's read the entire series. And my assumption is, yeah, that's because it didn't do particularly well. And that is why there are no more books that have come out, like sequel trilogies and stuff, because there's a lot that you could do with the universe in the state that it's left at the end. And if it's almost a shame that Sanderson isn't able to do, that Sanderson's Cosmere stuff is its own thing, and it's a shame that they can't have, like, I say a shame, I would have loved to have had like an Infinity War Endgame moment with Sanderson's books, where, you know, Spencer flies in Mbot, and David and Megan step through a portal from a different universe. You know, like, he has written so many stories that all have common themes and ideas, and obviously his writing style is so consistent across all of these books that I actually think it would be pretty fun to cross them all over. And one of the things that's actually quite interesting as well is if you crossed over Reckoners and Skyward, for example, both of those are first person, Cosmere stuff is third person, it would be quite cool to have first person chapters in some of those books. I'm diverging massively because, like, I do know somebody who's read these. Andrew has read all these books. Andrew, I can't remember what the name of his channel is. It's not Andrew Watson. Andrew, A Fantastical Journey with Andrew, I think his channel is called. I think he's read these and likes them, but, you know, like me, he's a fellow comic book fan. So the thing that I would say is, if you like comics and you like Sanderson's books, I think that there is zero reason not to pick these up. I'm shocked that these have not been made into superhero movies, because I guess the problem you've got is that people are so enamored with the boys now that it would probably be hard to separate the Reckoners books from the boys, because they're kind of like PG the boys almost. And I think it would have been very interesting to have done that, but we don't. Anyway, so I would have liked to have seen more books from this series, but that is not to say that the ending isn't satisfying. And I did feel like got like a kind of a, nice. Like it felt like it had wrapped up. Felt like it was done. Again, I would have liked to have had more books in this series, but that's the sort of thing where, like, yes, I'd like more books. However, I would have been very happy to be like, well, I won't read them for like a year, but I would like more books in this series. Do you know what I mean? I hope that makes sense to you guys. Like, I wasn't gagging for the next book, but I was thinking like, I wish there was more. Sanderson's kind of got his hands full with the Cosmere now. Like, the Cosmere is so big, and I think he's not even projected to finish it until he's like 70. So, I mean, obviously writers can continue to write much longer in their careers than people who are like athletes or whatever. But I don't know if I would want him to delay the Cosmere to do more Reckoners books. I just enjoyed the Reckoners. So yeah, I thought the ending was very satisfying. I really liked, in particular, David and Megan's arcs and how they resolved, and how their romance worked together. I think it's one of the most convincing romances that Sanderson has written, because he isn't particularly good at romance. For example, Adeline and Shallan in Stormlight Archive kind of feels like he planned for them to get together, not that they got together naturally. And like, yes, he's written all the characters and they're all planned, it's all outlined, blah blah blah, but like the relationship in Reckoners, and actually the kind of signature, the main relationship in the Skyward series is also more natural and convincing, possibly because you see those relationships from first person points of view, so how that, you see the feelings develop, you see the characters grow together, and I think that both of those really worked for me. What else did we need to talk about? Would I recommend this series? I think it's pretty obvious, yes. I will probably at some point do like a spoiler video on the whole series, because I think it might be fun to discuss. So if you are a Reckoners fan and you'd like to see that spoiler discussion, please drop down into the comments and let me know. While we're talking about the comments, I guess it's probably time to finish this episode out. So one thing I haven't talked about is the rating. So I actually rated this one 4 stars. I think I gave all 3 Reckoners books 4 stars. The thing that I said originally was that Steelheart was like a high 4, and Firefight was like a low 4. I might have even said a high 3 for Firefight, but because this series is so like terminally underread, I do feel a bit of a like, I kind of want to boost it, if that makes sense. So yeah, they're all in that 4-star range. They're all of a quality, but I would say that Firefight was a little bit weaker than the others. I think that Sanderson had a lot of stuff he wanted to cover in that book in terms of world and lore building, and the actual plot of the book gets kind of lost in that. And also, it's called Firefight, but it's not really about Firefight, whereas at least Steelheart and Calamity, the main antagonists are Steelheart and Calamity. I hope that makes sense. So, as I said before, please drop down below and let me know whether you'd be interested in a full spoiler video for the Reckoner series. I don't know when I'll get around to it, but I would like to talk more about the Reckoners and to give that recommendation out to people. If you liked this book, drop down below in the comments and let me know. The more people that leave comments on this video, the more this video will be shown to people on YouTube. So that would be very good for me. If you like this video, give it a like. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, I read, review and discuss fantasy and science fiction books all the time, 3 days a week, reviews on Mondays, weird stuff on Wednesdays, and Fridays we chat about what I'm reading. So come along, join the community, watch the Friday shows with us, and it would be lovely to have you here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll speak to you soon.